My sister sent me the photo at 8:47 on a Thursday night. She was standing in front of a gold-framed mirror, smiling in my wedding dress. Not a dress that looked like mine. Mine. The ivory lace, the pearl buttons, the tiny repaired tear near the left sleeve. Under the photo, Madison wrote, "You were too poor to get married first anyway." I stared at those words so long the screen dimmed in my hand. I was 29 years old, standing barefoot in my apartment in Charleston, South Carolina, with a paper bag of cold takeout hanging from my wrist. I had just finished a 10-hour shift reviewing insurance contracts, the kind of work nobody notices unless something goes wrong. My feet hurt, my blouse was wrinkled, and for one full minute I did not move. Then I walked to my bedroom closet and opened the door. The garment bag was on the floor. The zipper had been forced open. The padded hanger was still there, empty, swinging slightly from where someone had pulled too hard. I remember that tiny movement more than anything else. It made the theft feel recent, personal, like someone had been in my room only minutes before touching the one thing I had bought for a future I had dared to believe belonged to me. Only 3 people had a spare key to my apartment. My fiancé Ryan had one, my landlord had one locked in his office, and my mother Linda Walker had one, because 2 years earlier she had convinced me it was responsible for family to have access in case of emergencies. Apparently in my family, an emergency meant my younger sister wanting something I owned. I called my mother first. She answered on the 4th ring, already sounding tired of me. Before I could finish saying Madison had taken my dress, Mom sighed and said, "Emma, please don't start tonight." That was how I knew. She was not surprised. She was not confused. She was only annoyed that I had noticed before they were ready to manage my reaction. "Did you give her my key?" I asked. My voice was calm, but my hand was shaking so hard the phone tapped against my cheek. "Mom, did you let Madison into my apartment?" There was a pause, just long enough to tell the truth. Then she said, "Don't talk about your sister like she's a criminal. She needed the dress and you weren't being reasonable." Needed. That was the word my mother used whenever Madison wanted something that belonged to me. Madison needed my room when she wanted more closet space. Madison needed my graduation money when she got into trouble with a credit card. Madison needed my silence when she ruined Thanksgiving and cried before anyone could ask questions. In our house, Madison never took, she needed. I never lost. I was expected to share. "That dress is mine," I said. "I paid for it. I restored it. I'm getting married in 6 weeks." Mom made a small, impatient sound, the same sound she made when I was 12, and asked why Madison got a new bike while I kept the one with a cracked seat. "Emma, your wedding is small. Madison's wedding has 200 guests, the Caldwells, the mayor's wife, people who matter to this family. People who matter." I stood there beside my empty closet, and something cold settled behind my ribs. Ryan and I were getting married at a little church near the harbor, with folding chairs, grocery store flowers, and a reception in his aunt's backyard. Madison was marrying Ethan Caldwell at the Charleston Grand Hotel with champagne towers and a string quartet. In my mother's mind, that difference made my happiness adjustable. "She stole from me," I said. Mom's voice sharpened. "Family does not steal from family. Family helps family. You are the older sister, Emma. You should know better." There it was. The sentence that had followed me my entire life through broken toys and missed chances and apologies I never owed. "You're the older sister. You should know better." It sounded less like advice every year, and more like a chain. I hung up before she could turn my anger into disrespect. Then I sat down on the bedroom floor beside the torn garment bag, and let the silence press against me. I did not cry right away. That would have been too simple. I looked at the empty hanger, and thought about every extra shift I had taken, every lunch I had skipped, every little envelope of cash I had tucked into a coffee tin marked dress. The dress was not expensive by Madison's standards. She would have called it second-hand, and she would have said the word like it smelled bad. I found it in a small antique bridal shop 3 streets off King Street, tucked in the back under yellowing tissue paper. The owner told me it had come from an estate lot years earlier, and that nobody wanted it because it was old-fashioned. I wanted it for the same reason. It was ivory, not bright white with lace that looked delicate until you touched it and realized it had survived longer than most promises. I had spent 2 years restoring it, one careful repair at a time. A sleeve here, a hem there, new lining where the old silk had thinned. I was not rich, but every stitch felt like proof that I could build something beautiful without my family's permission. There had been one strange place inside the bodice near the left seam where the lining felt thicker than it should. The seamstress had noticed it once and asked if I wanted her to open it. I said no, because I was afraid of damaging the dress. I remembered that now, sitting on the floor staring at the photo Madison had sent. Her left hand was pressed exactly over that part of the gown. I drove to my parents' house before I could talk myself out of it. Ryan was still at work, and I did not call him. He loved me enough to be furious, and fury was exactly what my family was hoping for. They knew how to make me look unreasonable. They had practiced for years. If I came alone, calm and clear, they would have less to use against me. At least that was what I told myself. The lights were on when I pulled into the driveway. My father's truck was there. Madison's white SUV was parked crooked near the walkway, like she had arrived in a hurry, and still expected the world to make room for her. Through the front window I saw movement in the living room. Pale fabric, my mother's hand lifting a veil, Madison turning slowly in front of the mirror. I opened the front door with the key I still had from high school and stepped inside. Nobody heard me at first. My father was in his recliner pretending to read a newspaper. Mom stood behind Madison, pinning the veil into her hair. And Madison, my little sister, was wearing my wedding dress as if she had been born inside it. She looked beautiful. That was the worst part. Cruelty does not always look ugly. Madison saw me in the mirror and smiled. Not startled, not ashamed, pleased. "You came fast," she said, turning so the skirt moved around her legs. I wondered how long it would take. My mother closed her eyes like I was the embarrassing part of the evening. Dad lowered his newspaper halfway, looked at my face, then looked away. That was his specialty. Looking away just in time to remain innocent. "Take it off," I said. My voice sounded strange in that room, quieter than I expected. Madison laughed once, light and sharp. "You don't even ask nicely anymore." She touched the lace at her waist. "Honestly, Emma, it looks better on someone who actually has a future." My mother said her name, softly, but not as a warning. More like a reminder to be careful with witnesses. I stepped closer. "That dress was in my apartment. You took it without asking." Madison tilted her head. "Borrowed. And I'm saving it from being wasted." Mom moved between us slightly, her face tight with that church lady disappointment she wore whenever I refused to suffer gracefully. "Your sister's wedding is important, Emma. The Caldwell family has expectations. You can wear something else. Yours can be adjusted. Mine can be adjusted. My wedding, my dress, my life. All of it flexible as long as Madison remained untouched." I looked at my father, then hoping for something I already knew would not come. He folded his newspaper carefully and said, "Let's not make this bigger than it has to be." They had broken into my apartment, stolen my wedding dress, dressed my sister in it, and I was the one making it big. Madison stepped closer, lowering her voice so it would cut clean. "You can get something from a clearance rack. Nobody at your wedding will know the difference." I saw my mother's mouth tighten, but she did not correct her. That silence landed harder than the insult. It told me Madison had only said out loud what the rest of them had agreed to quietly. I reached for the dress, not to grab it, just to touch the seam. I remembered. The left side of the bodice had been pulled tight across Madison's ribs, and near the inner lining a thread had snapped. A tiny edge of aged paper showed beneath the fabric. My breath caught. It was real. Something had been sewn inside the dress, something old enough for the paper to have yellowed at the corner. "What is that?" I asked. Madison's hand flew to the spot so fast my mother noticed. For the first time all night, Madison looked less smug and more afraid. "Nothing," she said. I took another step. "Then move your hand." She backed away, gripping the fabric. "Don't touch me. Don't touch my dress. My dress." She said it without blinking, as if theft became ownership when said with enough confidence. "What's inside the dress?" I asked again. Madison's eyes flicked toward Mom. My mother's face had gone still, not confused. Still. That scared me more than Madison's panic. "Emma," Mom said carefully, "you need to leave before you do something you regret." But I was not looking at her anymore. I was looking at the seam, the paper, and the way both of them suddenly wanted me away from it. Then the front door opened behind me. Ethan Caldwell stepped into the living room wearing a navy suit and carrying a bakery box tied with white ribbon. He stopped when he saw us. Madison, in the dress, me pale and shaking. My mother standing like a guard. My father frozen behind his newspaper. Ethan's eyes moved from Madison's hand clamped over the lining to my face. Madison changed instantly. Her mouth trembled, her shoulders softened. Ethan, she said as if he had walked in on her being attacked. Emma's upset again. My mother moved beside her. She's under stress. Her own wedding has been difficult. I did not defend myself. I was too tired to perform sanity for people committed to calling me unstable. I looked at Ethan and said the only thing that mattered. That dress was in my apartment this morning. For a moment no one spoke. Ethan looked at Madison. You told me it was custom made. Madison's face flushed under the makeup. It was altered for me. That's not what I asked. His voice stayed polite, but something in it changed. He turned back to me. Is this your wedding dress? I nodded. Madison started crying then, quick and pretty, but Ethan was not watching her tears. He was watching her hand still pressed to the seam. He set the bakery box on the entry table like he suddenly did not trust himself to hold it. Then he asked the question that made my mother go silent, and Madison stopped crying for half a second. Why is your sister crying over the dress you said was custom made for you? Madison recovered first. She always did. It was one of her talents, the way she could trip over the truth and land in a pose that made everyone else look guilty. Her hand stayed pressed to the bodice of my dress while tears gathered in her eyes. I told you Emma was upset, she whispered to Ethan. She keeps making everything about her. I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want drama before the wedding. Ethan did not move toward her. That was the first thing I noticed. In my family, Madison's tears worked like a fire alarm. People jumped, people ran. People apologized even when they had not done anything. Ethan only stood there, his jaw tight, looking from my face to the dress. I asked you where the dress came from, he said. You told me a designer in Savannah made it for you. Madison gave a small laugh, too high and too quick. I said it was altered in Savannah. My mother stepped in before Ethan could answer. This is ridiculous. Emma is twisting words because she's jealous. You know how sisters can be. She smiled at Ethan with the polished warmth she saved for people with money. Madison has been under so much pressure. Emma should not have come here tonight. I watched Ethan absorb the room. Madison crying in my dress. My mother explaining before anyone asked. My father staring at the floor. Me standing by the doorway in work clothes, empty-handed, trying not to shake. I realized then that the truth does not always need a speech. Sometimes it only needs a room where every liar talks too fast. I bought that dress from Bellamy Bridal Antiques on Wentworth Street, I said. I have the receipt. I have photos from every alteration. I have messages from Madison wearing it tonight. Madison turned on me, her tears vanishing for one naked second. You are insane, she said. You're actually insane. Then she remembered Ethan was there, and softened her voice. See, this is what she does. She documents things to make people look bad. That almost made me laugh. In my job, documentation meant the difference between a denied claim and a family keeping their house after a fire. Dates mattered, signatures mattered, receipts mattered. But in my family, proof was treated as cruelty because it made lying inconvenient. I document things I said quietly because people in this family keep asking me to pretend I imagined what they did. My mother's face hardened. Enough. She pointed toward the door like I was a teenager again. Go home, Emma. I mean it. You are not ruining your sister's future because you feel insecure about yours. Ethan looked at her, then really looked at her, and something flickered across his expression. Not anger exactly. More like calculation. He had grown up around polite people too. Maybe he knew what cruelty sounded like when it wore perfume. I left without another word because I felt my control thinning. Madison smiled behind Ethan's shoulder as I opened the door. It was small, but I saw it. That smile told me she believed the night had ended the way it always did. Emma leaves. Madison keeps what she wants. Mom explains it as family. Dad pretends silence is neutrality. The house closes behind me, and the story becomes whatever they say it was. Ryan was waiting at my apartment when I got back. He was still in his work boots, sitting at my kitchen table with his hands clasped like he was holding himself in place. I had texted him only 3 words from the driveway. She took it. When he saw my face, he stood so fast the chair scraped the floor. I'm going over there, he said. No, I said, sharper than I meant to. He stopped, hurt flashing across his face before concern covered it. Ryan was a good man, and good men sometimes believe directness works on people who survive by distortion. Emma, they broke into your apartment. I know. Your sister stole your wedding dress. I know. Then why are we standing here? I dropped my keys into the bowl by the door and looked at the empty garment bag still on my bedroom floor. Because if you go there angry, they'll use you to prove I'm unstable. Ryan's face changed. He understood then, not all of it, but enough. He had watched my family smile through insults at dinners. He had heard my mother call me sensitive after Madison mocked his job. He had seen my father pat my shoulder and say, "Don't let it get to you," as if pain became smaller when ignored. Ryan walked over slowly and took my hands. "Then tell me what you need." What I needed was my dress back. What I needed was a mother who would have been horrified instead of strategic. What I needed was one person in that house to say, "Madison, take it off." But those were childish needs, or at least impossible ones. So I told Ryan the only thing I could control. I need proof. Clean proof. So when they lie, I don't have to sound louder. I just have to open a folder. I sat at my laptop until after midnight. I created a folder on my desktop and named it Wedding Dress Evidence. The title looked cold, almost silly until I started filling it. The receipt from Bellamy Bridal Antiques. The bank statement showing the purchase. Photos from the day I brought the dress home, wrinkled and yellowed in tissue paper. Emails from the seamstress. Appointment confirmations. Before and after pictures of the sleeve repair. Then I saved Madison's photo. I saved the message underneath it. "You were too poor to get married first anyway." I stared at that line again, but it hurt differently now. The first time it had felt like a knife. The second time it looked like a signature. Madison had not just stolen the dress. She had left proof of intent, because arrogance makes careless people feel untouchable. I exported the call log from my phone. I wrote down the time I had called Mom and what she said as closely as I could remember. Then I realized something and opened the voice recorder app I used for work calls when clients consented. I had not recorded my mother that night. But I did have a voicemail from 3 days earlier, one I had ignored because I had been busy. My mother's name sat there waiting. I played it on speaker. Linda's voice filled my kitchen, light and controlling. "Emma, call me back. Madison saw that dress when she stopped by last month and she has been very emotional about not finding anything with that kind of character. I think you need to consider what's best for the family. Ryan won't care what you wear. Ethan's family will." Ryan looked at me across the table. Neither of us spoke. I saved the voicemail into the folder. My hands were steady now. That surprised me. I had spent years being called dramatic, difficult, jealous, ungrateful. But drama does not label files. Drama does not preserve timestamps. Drama does not know the difference between a purchase receipt and an alteration invoice. For the first time all night I felt something other than hurt. I felt prepared. At 12:18 a.m., my phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. "Are you awake?" I stared at it, exhausted and suspicious. Another message came before I could answer. "This is Ethan Caldwell. I'm sorry to text this late. I got your number from the family group chat Madison added me to last month. I think there may be something inside the dress." Ryan leaned over my shoulder as I read it. A third message appeared. "Did you buy it from an estate sale or an antique shop connected to the Caldwell family?" My stomach tightened. I typed slowly. "I bought it from Bellamy Bridal Antiques. The owner said it came from an estate lot, but she didn't tell me whose." "Why?" The reply came almost immediately, as if Ethan had been standing with the phone in his hand. "When Madison moved her hand tonight, I saw part of an old paper inside the lining. I only saw a few letters, but one word looked like Caldwell. Then another message. It may have said, Margaret Caldwell. That was my grandmother. She died 11 years ago. Some of her documents went missing after her estate was packed up. My family has been looking for one contract in particular ever since." The apartment seemed to shrink around me. I looked toward my bedroom, toward the empty hanger, toward the floor where the dress should have been. Margaret Caldwell meant nothing to me, and yet the name landed like a key in a lock I had not known existed. I typed. There was a thick place in the lining. My seamstress asked if I wanted it opened. I said no. I thought it was part of the structure. Ethan's answer took longer this time. "My grandmother had a friend named Grace Walker. Did you ever hear that name?" My fingers froze above the screen. Grace Walker was my mother. My real mother. She died when I was 7, leaving behind a smell of lavender lotion, 3 blurry photographs, and a silence my father filled too quickly with Linda. In our house, Grace was not discussed. Not because she had done wrong. Because remembering her made Linda uncomfortable. I wrote, "Grace Walker was my mother. The dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Ethan finally replied, Emma, I think your mother may have held something for my grandmother. My dad always said the missing contract was last seen with a woman named Grace. We never had proof. If that paper is what I think it could affect part of my family's estate that has been frozen for years. I stood up so quickly the chair legs caught on the floor. Ryan said my name, but I was already going to the plastic storage bin under my bed where I kept old receipts and wedding things. I pulled out the envelope from Bellamy Bridal Antiques. Inside were the original photos the owner had printed for me before restoration. I spread them across the bed with shaking hands and used my phone flashlight to inspect each one. There it was. In the third photo, the dress was turned inside out over a tailor's form. Near the left bodice seam sat a small square of fabric, almost the same color as the lining but stitched with thread a shade darker. I had never noticed how deliberate it looked. Not a repair, not support, a pocket, a hidden one. I took a picture and sent it to Ethan. His reply came back in under a minute. That placement makes sense. My grandmother used to sew papers into garment linings when she traveled. She didn't trust banks after my grandfather's business partner forged her signature. My father thought that story was just family folklore. Then another message followed. Please don't confront Madison alone again. If she knows what's inside, she may destroy it. I looked at Ryan, and he looked back at me with the same realization. This was no longer only about a stolen wedding dress. Madison had taken a garment from my apartment to humiliate me, but she may have also taken a contract that connected my dead mother to one of the most powerful families in Charleston. And my mother Linda had gone pale when she saw that paper in the lining. At 1:46 a.m., Linda sent a group text to me, Ryan, Madison, Dad and Ethan. Emma, after tonight's behavior, we think it's best you do not attend the wedding. Madison deserves peace on her special day. Please respect the family and stay home. I read it once. Then again. Madison stole my dress, wore it in front of me, hid whatever was sewn inside it, and now I was being removed from the room where the lie would be celebrated. Ryan swore under his breath. Ethan did not reply in the group chat. Madison did. Thank you, Mom. I just want one day without jealousy. My father sent nothing. His silence had its own grammar by then. It meant he agreed with whoever required less courage to oppose. I saved the entire thread into the folder and backed it up to my email. Then I forwarded Ethan the screenshots. His response was simple. I'm going to find out what's in that dress before I marry anyone. I looked at those words for a long time. Not because I trusted Ethan. I barely knew him, but because he had done something no one in my family had done that night. He had seen a crack in Madison's story and decided not to plaster over it for convenience. I slept maybe 2 hours. When I woke, the Charleston morning was bright, and indifferent sunlight falling across the empty space in my closet where the garment bag had been. My wedding was still 6 weeks away. Madison's was in 2 days. My mother had banned me from attending. My sister had my dress. Ethan had a suspicion, and somewhere inside ivory lace and old lining was a name that might belong to my mother, his grandmother, or the truth neither family wanted opened. At 7:03 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Ethan had sent one sentence. Emma, if that paper is real, Madison isn't just wearing your stolen dress, she's wearing my family's missing contract. Madison's wedding was scheduled for Saturday afternoon at the Halston Grand, the kind of hotel people in Charleston mentioned like it was proof of breeding. It had marble floors, brass railings, and a ballroom with windows tall enough to make ordinary people feel temporary. I had only been inside once before for a work luncheon, where I spent half the time worrying whether my shoes looked too cheap against the carpet. By 10 that morning, Madison's social media was already full of polished little pieces of her lie. A photo of white roses, a video of champagne being poured, a close-up of her hand resting on my ivory lace sleeve with the caption "Vintage Caldwell Elegance." I stared at those words until they blurred. She had stolen my dress from my apartment, and by breakfast, she had turned it into family branding. Ryan wanted to come with me. He stood in my kitchen holding his truck keys, jaw set, watching me slide the printed. But I also knew that if Ryan arrived angry, my mother would get exactly what she wanted. A scene. A man in work boots raising his voice in a luxury hotel. Proof that Emma brought chaos. I need you nearby, I told him. Not beside me yet. That hurt him, but he nodded because he loved me without needing to control how I survived. He drove separately and parked 2 blocks away. If I texted him, he would come. Until then, I walked into the Halston Grand alone, wearing a blue dress I had bought years ago for a company Christmas dinner and shoes that pinched my heel. The lobby smelled like lilies and expensive candles. Guests moved past me in silk pearls, dark suits and careful smiles. I recognized people from Madison's engagement party, people who had asked what I did for work and then looked past me while I answered. Above the ballroom doors a sign read, Caldwell Walker Wedding in gold script. Walker. My last name was on the sign, but my name was not on the guest list. The security attendant checked the tablet and gave me the apologetic smile people use when they have been told someone might be a problem. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I don't see an Emma Walker listed." I expected it, but expectation did not make it hurt less. My sister was inside wearing my wedding dress. My mother was probably greeting guests like a woman who had raised two daughters equally. And I was standing outside a ballroom being erased politely. Before I could answer, Madison appeared near the side entrance. The dress moved around her like a borrowed ghost. My borrowed ghost. Her makeup was perfect, her hair pinned in soft waves, the veil trailing behind her. A bridesmaid hovered behind her, smiling until she saw my face. Madison leaned close enough that the security guard could not hear. "You really came all this way to watch me wear it?" Something inside me went very still. There were so many things I could have said. I could have called her a thief in front of the guests. I could have demanded security search the dress. I could have reached for that seam with both hands, and let the whole lobby see what panic looked like on her face. Instead, I lifted my phone and sent Ethan one message. "I'm outside. I have proof. If you want the truth before you marry her, now is the time." Madison watched me type and laughed softly. "Texting Ryan to come rescue you?" she asked. "That's sweet. Maybe he can buy you a white dress from a thrift store on the way." I looked at her then, really looked. Under the expensive makeup, her eyes were bright with the same hunger I had seen since childhood. She did not just want the dress. She wanted me to know she could take it. My phone buzzed. Ethan replied, "Stay there," 2 words. My pulse moved into my throat. Madison's smile faltered when she saw my expression. From inside the ballroom, the wedding planner called her name, frantic and cheerful. "Madison, we need you upstairs for final photos." Madison recovered, lifted her chin and said, "Enjoy the lobby, Emma." Then she turned, carrying my train behind her like a victory flag. Ethan came down 5 minutes later through a side hallway, not the grand staircase. He had removed his boutonniere, or maybe he had never put it on. His face looked controlled in the way people look when they are trying not to react before they understand everything. "Emma," he said. "Do you have it?" I handed him the folder. For a strange second, I felt like I was passing over the last piece of my dignity and hoping he would not drop it. He opened it on a small table near the coat check. The first page was the receipt from Bellamy Bridal Antiques. The second was the bank statement. Then the alterations, the emails, the old photos, the picture Madison had sent me, and the text below it. He stopped there. His thumb hovered over Madison's words. "You were too poor to get married first anyway." His face changed, but only slightly. "She sent this to you?" he asked. "Yes." My voice did not break. I was proud of that. After someone used my mother's spare key to take the dress from my apartment. He looked at the voicemail transcript next, then at the group message banning me from the wedding. When he reached Madison's line about wanting one day without jealousy, his mouth tightened. "She told me you had been threatening to show up in white." I almost smiled. Of course she had. "I came in blue," I said. Ethan looked up then, and for the first time I saw shame in his eyes. Not for himself exactly, but for having stood close enough to the lie to be warmed by it. "I need to look inside the dress," he said. "If she refuses," I said, "that tells you something too." He closed the folder carefully like it mattered. The wedding planner found him before he could leave. She was a small woman with a headset, a clipboard, and the terrified brightness of someone managing rich people under pressure. "Mr. Caldwell, we are 8 minutes from processional. Your mother is asking for you." Ethan said, "Tell her I need 5. The planner looked at me then, at the folder, then back at him. She knew something was wrong, but she was paid not to know unless instructed. Ethan walked upstairs toward the bridal suite. I followed at a distance because he did not tell me not to, and because the dress was still mine. At the hallway corner, Linda stepped out from behind a floral arrangement, as if she had been waiting. "Ethan," she said, her smile strained. "There you are. Madison is very emotional. This is not the time for Emma's behavior." She said my name without looking at me. Ethan's tone stayed polite. "I need to speak with Madison privately." My mother's eyes dropped to the folder. Whatever Emma showed you, I'm sure she made it look worse than it is. Sisters fight. Weddings bring out insecurity. I felt the old pull then. That automatic urge to defend myself, explain myself, prove I was not jealous or unstable or small. But Ethan answered before I could. If it's just a sister fight, he said, then Madison can explain the dress. Linda's smile thinned. Behind her, the bridal suite door opened, and Madison appeared, surrounded by satin robes, perfume, and bridesmaids, who suddenly sensed they were trapped in a scene not meant for them. She saw Ethan. Then she saw me. Then she saw the folder. For one exposed moment she looked furious enough to stop pretending. "What is she doing up here?" Madison snapped. One of the bridesmaids took a step back. Ethan held up one hand, not harshly, just enough to stop the room from spinning. "I need to see the inside lining of the dress." Madison stared at him. "Excuse me, the left bodice seam," he said. "Where I saw the paper." The room went silent in a way no music could cover. Madison's eyes filled instantly. "You're letting her poison you against me on our wedding day." She pressed one hand dramatically to her chest right over the seam. "Ethan, this is cruel." Linda stepped beside her. "This is humiliating. Guests are waiting downstairs. Whatever Emma thinks she saw, it can be handled after the ceremony." After the ceremony. After the vows. After Madison became Mrs. Caldwell while wearing stolen lace and a hidden contract. Ethan did not raise his voice. "If there is nothing inside the dress, let me look." It was the calmness that broke the room open. Madison could fight anger. She could cry against accusation, but calm gave her nothing to perform against. "No," she said. Then realizing how that sounded, she added, "You'll ruin it. It's delicate." I heard myself speak from the doorway. "It survived 70 years. It can survive honesty." Madison turned on me. "Shut up!" Not cried, not pleaded, snapped. The bridesmaids heard it. Ethan heard it. Linda closed her eyes briefly, as if Madison had stepped off script. Ethan reached toward the seam carefully with 2 fingers. Madison jerked backward so hard her heel caught in the hem. Her hand grabbed the lining. There was a small ripping sound, thin as paper tearing in church. Something slipped from the bodice and fluttered down between them. It did not fall dramatically. It did not glow. It was just a folded sheet, yellowed with age, creased flat from years hidden against fabric. But everyone in that room watched it land on the polished wood floor like it had weighed 100 pounds. Madison froze. Linda made a sound so small I might have imagined it. Ethan bent and picked it up. He unfolded it with careful hands. The paper was old, but the ink was still dark enough to read. I was standing too far away to see the full text, but I saw his eyes stop at the top. I saw recognition move through him slowly, then all at once. He whispered one name, not to us but to the paper. "Margaret." Madison reached for it. "Give me that." Ethan lifted it out of her reach. That was when I saw my mother's face. All the color had drained from it. She was not looking at Madison anymore. She was looking at the bottom of the page where a second signature sat beneath the first. Ethan read it aloud, voice low. "Margaret Ann Caldwell." Then his gaze moved lower. "Grace Walker." My knees almost softened. My mother, my real mother's name, in Madison's bridal suite, inside my stolen wedding dress, on a contract no one had told me existed. Linda stepped forward quickly. "Ethan, that is an old family matter. It has nothing to do with today." He looked at her then, and the room changed. "You know what this is," he said. It was not a question. The wedding planner knocked and opened the door without waiting. "I'm so sorry, but we have to start now. Guests are seated. The officiant is ready. Madison, we need you downstairs." Madison seized on the interruption like a drowning person grabbing a rope. "We're done with this. Ethan, please. Don't let her do this to us." She touched his sleeve. Her hand trembled. Ethan looked at the contract, then at Madison, standing in my dress, then at me in the doorway with my plain blue folder against my chest. I do not know what finally decided him. Maybe it was Madison refusing to let him look. Maybe it was Linda recognizing the paper. Maybe it was my mother's name at the bottom of a document hidden against my heart for years without my knowledge. He folded the contract once gently. Madison whispered, "Ethan, think about what you're doing." He said, "I am." We followed because there was nowhere else for the truth to go. Downstairs, the violin music had already begun. Guests stood expecting a bride. Instead, Ethan stepped into the doorway alone, holding an old folded contract in his hand. The music faltered, then stopped. Madison appeared behind him, pale and furious beneath the veil. Linda came after her, trying to smile as if this too could be managed. I stood last, half hidden near the back, my heart hitting my ribs so hard I could barely hear the whispers beginning to rise. Ethan walked to the front of the aisle and faced 200 guests who had come to witness a wedding. "There will be a delay," he said. The officiant blinked. Ethan looked toward Madison once, then lifted the paper just enough for the front rows to see it. His voice carried across the ballroom, calm and devastating. "This wedding cannot continue until someone explains why my grandmother's missing contract was sewn inside the bride's stolen dress." For a few seconds nobody understood what Ethan had said. Not really. 200 well-dressed guests stood beneath chandeliers holding programs printed with Madison's name, waiting for music and vows, and the kind of pretty lie people clap for because it comes wrapped in flowers. Then the word "stolen" moved through the room, first quiet and electric. After that came contract. After that came grandmother. By the time people turned toward Madison, she was no longer a bride. She was evidence in white. Madison made a sound that was half sob, half warning. "Ethan, don't do this." Her voice carried because the ballroom had gone so still. Linda stepped forward quickly, smiling with every muscle except her eyes. "Everyone, please, there's been a misunderstanding. Weddings are emotional, and my older daughter has brought some private family tension into a very inappropriate place." She looked directly at me, then sharpening the word "inappropriate," like she wanted it placed in my mouth. Ethan did not let her finish. "Mrs. Walker," he said, "did you know this paper was inside the dress?" Linda opened her mouth, closed it, smiled again. "That dress has been handled by many people over many years. I couldn't possibly know what was sewn inside it. It was not a confession. Linda was too smart for that. But I had lived under her roof long enough to recognize her careful answers. She was not trying to tell the truth. She was trying to leave herself exits." Ethan unfolded the paper, and his father, Harold Caldwell, rose from the front row. He was a tall man with silver hair and the kind of posture that made silence feel like authority. "Ethan," he said quietly, "bring that here." Ethan stepped down from the front and handed him the contract. Harold read the first page. His expression did not change much, but his hand tightened around the paper. Then he looked at me. "Are you Grace Walker's daughter?" he asked. Hearing my mother's name in that room made something inside me ache. "Yes," I said. My voice sounded smaller than I wanted it to, but it did not disappear. "Grace was my mother." Harold looked back at the contract. "Your mother was my mother's friend. A close one. We were told some of Margaret's documents disappeared after Grace died. We were also told the Walker family had nothing left from her belongings." Linda moved fast then, but not physically. She moved with words. "Grace left chaos behind," she said, her voice low but clear enough for nearby guests to hear. "I did what I could to protect this family. Emma was a child. Madison was a child. Robert was grieving. You have no idea what I had to manage." There it was again. Sacrifice, responsibility, family. The same pretty cage she had built around every selfish decision. My father stood from the second row. For one hopeful second I thought he might finally say something. He might look at Linda and ask why my mother's name was on a hidden contract. He might look at Madison and tell her to take off my dress. Instead, he said, "Maybe we should discuss this privately." The words landed exactly where his silence always had, between truth and comfort, protecting the person who made the most noise. "No," I said. Everyone turned. I had not meant to speak so sharply, but once the word came out I felt steadier. I walked forward, the navy folder pressed against my ribs. My blue dress felt plain under the chandeliers, but for the first time that day, I was not embarrassed by anything I wore. This stopped being private when my sister stole my wedding dress, wore it in front of 200 people and told them it was hers. Madison spun toward me. "You are disgusting," she hissed. "You're enjoying this." I looked at her, standing there in lace. I had saved for lace. I had repaired lace she had dragged through lies all morning. "No," I said. "I'm not enjoying it. I'm just done helping you hide it." Then I opened the folder. My hands did not shake. That was the part I remember most clearly. Not the whispers. Not the cameras rising. My own hands steady at last. I gave Ethan the receipt first, then the bank statement, then the photos of the dress in my apartment yellowed and wrinkled before restoration, then the emails from my seamstress confirming every repair. then Madison's photo printed on plain paper with her message underneath. You were too poor to get married first anyway. Someone in the front row gasped. Madison lunged toward the page, but Ethan stepped between us. She knew it was mine, I said. She wanted me to know she had taken it. My mother knew too. I handed over the transcript of Linda's voicemail. Harold read it aloud, not dramatically, just clearly. Madison saw that dress when she stopped by last month. She has been very emotional about not finding anything with that kind of character. I think you need to consider what's best for the family. Ryan won't care what you wear. Ethan's family will. Linda's face hardened in a way I had seen only at home, never in public. That proves nothing except that I asked you to be generous. I turned to her then. You didn't ask. You gave Madison my key. You let her into my apartment. You helped her steal from me, then banned me from the wedding so nobody would hear my side. My mother's eyes flashed. You always make yourself the victim. I almost smiled. The script was so old I could have said her lines with her. Ethan held up the contract. This document appears to state that Margaret Caldwell entrusted certain family papers and heirlooms to Grace Walker for safekeeping. It names Grace as custodian, not owner. It also requires that upon Grace's death, the items be returned to the Caldwell estate or its legal representative. His voice stayed controlled, but the room heard the meaning. If Linda had found those items after Grace died and sold them, hidden them, or disposed of them, she had not managed family chaos. She had interfered with property that was never hers. Harold looked at Linda. Did you sell items from Grace Walker's storage after her death? Linda's chin lifted. I sold old clutter to pay household bills. The answer came too quickly. Robert closed his eyes. Madison stared at her mother, not shocked by the act, only terrified by the consequences. Harold folded the contract carefully. Then my attorney will want a complete inventory of what was sold, when, and to whom. That was when Madison broke. Not because she was sorry, not because she had hurt me, because the story was no longer obeying her. This is insane, she cried. All of this, over a dress. She didn't deserve it. She was going to waste it on some cheap little wedding with folding chairs and grocery store flowers. Her voice cracked on the last word, and the ballroom went silent in a way I had never heard before. It was not shock, it was recognition. Ethan looked at Madison like he was finally seeing the person behind the bridal makeup. You knew, he said. She wiped at her cheeks. She always gets sympathy. She always acts like everyone is against her. Did you know the dress was hers? He asked. Madison looked at Linda, then at me, then at all the guests who could no longer be turned into an audience for her victimhood. She whispered, she didn't deserve to wear it before me. Ethan closed the ring box. The small click sounded louder than the violin had. Madison heard it and reached for him. Ethan, please. I was upset. She provoked me. She always does this. He stepped back. Not cruelly. Finally. There will be no wedding today, he said. Madison stared at him as if he had spoken a language she had never learned. You can't humiliate me like this. Ethan looked at the dress. You did that yourself. The aftermath did not explode all at once. It unraveled. Guests were asked to leave the ballroom. The officiant closed his book. The wedding planner cried in a service hallway while trying to cancel the reception timeline. Harold Caldwell called his attorney from the lobby using a voice so calm it frightened Linda more than yelling would have. Madison disappeared into the bridal suite, with 2 bridesmaids still wearing my dress, because no one knew how to remove evidence without damaging it. Ryan arrived 10 minutes after I texted him. He found me sitting on a bench near the coat check, the folder open on my lap, my body suddenly too tired to hold itself upright. He crouched in front of me, still in his good shirt and work boots, and looked into my face like the whole hotel could wait. Are you okay? He asked. I looked toward the ballroom doors where my mother was arguing with someone who no longer believed her. Not yet, I said. But I'm done pretending I'm the problem. The dress was returned to me 3 days later after a seamstress hired by the Caldwell attorney removed the contract from the lining without tearing the bodice further. Ethan brought it himself in a sealed garment box. He stood outside my apartment, looking exhausted and older than he had at the wedding. I'm sorry, he said, not just for the dress, for almost marrying someone who could do that and still call herself wronged. I did not comfort him. That was not my job. But I did tell him the truth. Madison is good at making people feel responsible for the pain she causes. He nodded. So is your mother. The words should have stung, but they only settled. I already knew. I had always known. The difference was that now other people knew too, and I was no longer carrying the truth alone. Linda called me 37 times that week. Sometimes she cried, sometimes she threatened, sometimes she said Grace would be ashamed of me for destroying the family. That was the only message that almost made me call back. Then I remembered my mother's name on that contract hidden in the lining of a dress Linda had helped steal. Grace had left something behind after all. Not money for me, not a house, a truth, and Linda had tried to bury it in lace. My father sent one letter. It was handwritten 3 pages long, full of sentences that began with, "I should have, and I didn't know how." I read the first page, then folded it and put it in a drawer. Maybe someday I would finish it, maybe not. Silence has a cost, and I was no longer accepting payment plans from people who spent years buying their comfort with my pain. The Caldwell investigation continued quietly. Some items were traced to estate dealers, some were gone forever. Linda hired a lawyer. Madison moved out of her apartment after Ethan canceled the lease he had been paying for. I heard pieces of it from people who thought I wanted updates. I didn't. There is a strange freedom in realizing that consequences do not need your supervision to be real. 6 weeks later, Ryan and I got married in the little church near the harbor. We kept the folding chairs. We kept the grocery store flowers. His aunt made lemon cake in 3 uneven layers, and it tasted better than anything that would have been served under chandeliers. I wore the ivory dress after my seamstress repaired the lining. The place where the contract had been hidden was stitched, closed with thread so fine you could barely see it. Before the doors opened, I stood alone in the small bridal room and placed my hand over that seam. For years I had thought healing meant becoming untouched by what happened. I know better now. Healing is not the absence of a scar. Sometimes it is choosing what the scar gets to mean. That seam had once held a secret, then it held evidence. Now it held nothing but my own body breathing steadily underneath. I did not invite Linda. I did not invite Madison. Robert was not there either. People asked me later if that made the day sad. It didn't. Their absence felt like space. For the first time, nobody stood behind me whispering that I should shrink so someone else could shine. Nobody told me to wait my turn. Nobody called my joy adjustable. When the music began, I looked at Ryan waiting at the end of the aisle, crying openly and not ashamed of it. Madison had said I was too poor to get married first. Maybe she was right about one small thing. I did not get married first. I got married free. I walked slowly, not because I wanted everyone to look at me, but because I had spent my whole life being rushed out of rooms where my truth made people uncomfortable. This time I took every step. My sister stole my wedding dress because she thought I was too poor to get married first. But in the end, she only proved one thing some people can wear: white, stand in front of everyone, and still be the reason the whole ceremony stops.